Good evening from Pretoria after day 2 of the Oscar Pistorius murder trial, a day that has proved emotional for the witnesses and for the accused, and a day of controversy. At one stage, Pistorius himself was seen wiping a tear from his eyes as he listened to evidence of the night that he shot dead his girlfriend, Reeva Steenkamp. And one of his neighbours, Berger, at one point broke down in court as she recalled hearing a woman's screams on the night of the shooting. A little earlier, the judge had interrupted proceedings to reprimand the media after discovering a local newspaper and a local news channel had shown pictures of Miss Berger against her wishes. Paul Harrison's report contains some flash photography.
Running the courtroom gauntlet.
Make way, come, make way.
Oscar Pistorius alongside his brother Carl, sheltering from the rain, protected from the cameras. But while it is the athlete on trial for murder, barely before his defence lawyer Barry Roux could resume his cross-examination of state witnesses, the South African media found itself in the dock.
You did not believe Oscar Pistorius' version.
As witness, Berger continued her testimony. Through an intervention from prosecutor Jerry Nell, she learned her photograph was being shown on television, despite choosing not to appear on camera in court.
I heard a woman screaming. I'm really sorry to interrupt Mr. Roux' cross-examination, but I've just been informed that they're showing this witness's face on the TV as we speak. And there's been a court order that should not be allowed. And it's now happening, milady, and I really do think we should stop that.
Who's responsible for this?
Milady, I've been shown on a cell phone by our media person there that they're showing that. Perhaps we should just take an adjournment so that we can investigate what's going on.
Yes, please do.
After a brief break in proceedings, the judge returned to make it absolutely clear she wouldn't tolerate a repeat performance.
I must say this is very disturbing. I am warning the media, if you do not behave, you are not going to be treated with soft gloves by this court.
There were certainly no soft gloves from Pistorius' lawyer. His sole intention, keep his client out of prison by discrediting witness Berger's sequence of events.
I'm just giving to the court my perception that morning.
You know what it is, why I'm getting back to this point. And I will refer to a number of instances in your evidence. And I will submit to the court, and I want to give you the opportunity to respond to it. What you do, you have watched Sky News, you've watched other news channels, you've spoken to people that came out in your evidence, and you have a retrospective knowledge. And you take that knowledge and you come and give evidence today as if it's the knowledge of that fateful evening.
Milady, as I stated yesterday, I spoke to numerous people that morning before finding out of anything that it was Mr. Pistorius. I spoke to my colleagues at work. They can justify what I said. I even spoke to my friend that's here today to support me. I phoned her at the hospital to tell her about what I heard. So I did not change and alter what I heard.
Barry Roux also took issue with how well neighbour Berger could have heard what she did from her home more than 170 metres from the scene of the shooting.
You could hear fear in that voice. You could hear emotion in that voice. Accepting that those screaming predominantly coincided and was simultaneous with the firing of 4 gunshots. You had that ability from 177 meters to hear emotion and fear and increase in intensity in that moment plus the gunshots.
Ma'am, the terrible emotion I heard, the petrifying screams, I heard that moments before the gunshots. That's how I could hear the emotion. I did hear it. It was petrifying.
But we know it was a moment.
Moments.
It was so short in that moments you can hear all those, the emotions, the intensity, the increased intensity, the just petrified, all in those moments.
Yes, ma'am, it's automatic. It's instinct. You
Yes,
hear it.
177 meters away in your house,
Yes.
coming from another house.
Ma'am, our windows were open. We had no aircon and no roof fan, and there was no vertical building between our house at that stage and the other house.
But something else troubled Pistorius' lawyer. On top of the witness's distance from the scene, how could Reeva Steenkamp's screams be heard when she was locked inside a toilet?
There's no dispute that when the shots were fired, Reeva was in the toilet. We know the door was closed. We know it was locked. We know, we have the photos, that the toilet window was closed. So what you are saying to the court, 177 meters away, where you only had a moment before the shots, and then shots where the person is in a confined space, you could hear increased anxiety, fear, and motion in that moment, because the rest, moments later, we know there were gunshots. You heard that out of a closed toilet in a house 177 meters away.
Milady, that's correct. I heard that.
Ma'am, I will invite the state at the time later on, we don't want to waste time, to go and do a test. And I tell you now, it's a fact, in case there's some misunderstanding, you can scream as loud as you want in that toilet and we'll put the door back for you. And 177 meters, you go and tell us that you can hear that screaming.
But there was a further rebuttal from Roux on Berger's insistence she heard Reeva Steenkamp scream after the fourth gunshot.
The total impact of that shot would not have allowed her to scream. I want to add one thing extra. In fact, the state witness tells us, Mr. Mangena, with the head shot, she would have dropped down immediately. There was serious brain damage. And our evidence will be that a person with that brain damage will have no response, no cognitive function, no thought process. That's all coming in. That's what I put to this witness. And that will be coupled to the evidence of the accused, what he found and whether there was any response and all the events. So all I put to this witness, when you talk about the screaming, whatever interpretation after the last bullet, it cannot be on our case, on the expert witnesses. It cannot be. She could not have screamed.
Milady, as I stated yesterday, I heard her voice just after the last shot. It faded away.
Pistorius' legal team also questioned the university lecturer's statement to a police officer and its remarkable similarities to her husband's.
Did you see it on the table? That you can read it?
I didn't read the statement.
Did you see it?
Well, I didn't look for the statement, so if it was there, it might have been lying there with papers, but I did not look for the statement.
Was he referring you to his statement?
No, he didn't.
To help you, to say, let me help you?
No, he wasn't. He wasn't referring to that. He asked me for my version. What did I hear?
And you gave then your independent version.
Yes, as I
independent from your husband.
Correct.
Michelle Berger's comeback perhaps caught Barry Roux off guard and provided the day's lighter moment.
Meaning the window was open. That's the next crucial point.
Yeah.
Yours, the window was open. The next crucial point.
Yes, sir. We were in the same bedroom. The same bed, the same window.
But the laughter was short-lived as Roux accused Michelle Berger of dishonesty.
You see what I mean? I can take you to all the other paragraphs as well. It's striking.
Milady, that's what I heard, and I'm glad to hear my husband heard exactly the same.
I'm afraid that is not too honest. You know what he's saying. It's not glad to hear. It's not new. You know that.
So I did not read this statement.
Yes, of course not. Of course not.
I object to that remark that Mr. Roux just made. It's sarcastic and it shouldn't be made. And he should
I
apologise
agree.
to
I
the
withdraw
witness.
that. I
I
apologize.
agree.
My lady, it's absolutely right.
Yes.
I agree. I apologize.
There's no doubt Oscar Pistorius is fully engaged with the trial and his legal team, here seen passing a note forward to Barry Roux. But there are times when being transported back to the events of February the 14th last year become too much for the Olympian. Whatever the events of that evening, they are etched on Pistorius's mind. For Michelle Berger, it seems it was the screams that night she finds difficult to forget.
It was quite raw still.
It was quite
Raw, the emotion.
a raw emotion.
When I'm in the shower, I relive her shouts.
You said to him that when you're in the shower, you relive the shouts.
Her terrifying screams.
2 further witnesses were called today to give evidence about what they heard in the early hours of February the 14th last year, Valentine's Day. The husband of Michelle Berger, who gave evidence this morning, said that he and his wife felt morally obliged to come forward when they realised their account of what happened that night was different from Pistorius's evidence at his bail hearing last year. Another witness, Estelle Vandemeyer, who lives opposite Pistorius's home, said she was woken by loud voices in the early hours of that morning. We joined proceedings as she's called to give evidence.
My lady, I woke up around 1:56 in the morning. I heard sounds. It seemed like somebody was involved in a fight. And these people were talking in loud voices, my lady. And I also couldn't understand in what language this person was talking. My lady, I was irritated by that because I was supposed to go, I was supposed to sleep, seeing that my boy was supposed to sit for his exams shortly. At some stage, I placed a pillow on top of my head with the hope of falling asleep once more, or again, my lady. And around about 3 o'clock in the morning, I heard 4 gunshots, my lady.
Please explain the best you can what you heard. The 4 sounds, what was it?
It sounded like, do you want me to describe
Yes.
the sound?
If you can.
As ek het kan doen, mevrouw.
Bang, bang.
Bang, bang, as she says it, my
Beste wat
lady.
ek kan.
That's the best I can do. After hearing the four sounds, there was total silence, my lady.
What happened then after that?
Wat het daarna plaasgevonden? After I heard the 4 shots, I heard my husband waking up. I then asked him what was doing that. He then said those were firearm sounds or gunshots. We then heard a commotion. My husband then called the security. But shortly after that, then heard somebody was crying out loud.
Okay, you heard somebody crying.
I then asked my husband as to who was crying like that. He then said it was Oscar. Because to me it seemed like a woman's voice. My husband called the security company late in the morning just to ascertain from them as to what was happening. That's when they told him that Oscar shot his friend.
Did you hear any screams by any?
Het enige of geskree gehoor.
Glad nie.
Not at all.
Barry Roux, Pistorius' defence advocate, then cross-examined Mrs. Vandemeyer. He suggested that she was mistaken in what she'd heard.
The fact is, you never heard any arguing.
Ik heb geen argument gehoord, nee. Hysterie. I did. But I must say that I know a woman's voice.
En as dis gewoonlik in 'n vrou se stem waar daar baie buige beweging is,
And there's many movements within a woman's voice,
wanneer ons kwaad raak.
especially when we become angry or cross, my lady.
But here it's far away. You can't hear words, you can't hear language.
The last witness in today's session was the husband of Michelle Berger, who'd continued her testimony earlier today. Charles Johnson told the court that he and his wife had initially been reluctant to give evidence, as they thought a closer neighbour to Pistorius would have come forward. He confirmed that both he and his wife had been woken by a woman's screams the night of the shooting.
After the first screams, I woke up. I lifted my head from the pillow to ensure that I heard correctly. And when I heard the lady scream again, I jumped out of bed and I ran to the balcony, which is on the first floor. When I got out onto the balcony, I stood there and I listened, and I again heard a lady person screaming. I could hear she was in trouble. was clearly distress calls. I can't say exactly how long I stood there. It felt like a couple of minutes. And at one point I heard a lady person scream, "Help!" And moments after that, a male voice shouted 2 or 3 times. I'm not exactly certain, but it's more than once. A male person shouted, "Help, help, help." It's at that point that my wife, who woke up when I got out of bed, called me back to the bedroom and said we should phone the security. We tried to sleep. I lay in bed, obviously concerned for our own security. We were under the impression that someone had been attacked in their house in a very secure complex. And my thinking was that if it could happen to them, the same could happen to us. So I lay awake thinking about how I can improve our security in our house. The afternoon when I got home, I got onto our roof, the roof of our house, and I took a camera with me, and I was able to see the house, Oscar Pistorius' house, from our rooftop, and I took a photograph from there. I then proceeded to go and look at the Google Earth image and used a utility that is available on the Google Earth website to measure the distance.
It wasn't until the bail hearing last year that he said it became clear their account differed from that of Pistorius.
Initially, we didn't want to get involved. We also assumed that if we were so far away, 170 meters, I believe, I assumed that there would be many people that are much closer to the actual house that would have a much clearer recollection and would have heard more clearly what had happened. We listened to the court proceedings on the radio, and I recall a statement being made by the defense that there was only one person that had shouted or screamed that evening, and that was the accused. My version differed from that, and I felt morally obliged to come forward and provide my version.
Well, let's have a look at what's been going on in court today and what the South African public has made of the first 2 days of what is undoubtedly a show trial here in this country. Joining me, our correspondent Alex Crawford and Aubrey Masango from 702 Radio. He's a talk show host. Alex, a very emotional and dramatic day in court today.
Yes, it was. For the first time we saw the athlete's demeanour crack. He's been very composed up till now. He spent a lot of time taking notes, passing notes to his lawyer, occasionally turning and talking to his family, but most of the time concentrating entirely on what's happening legally. Today, as we heard details of how Reeva Steenkamp died, her specific injuries, the fact Barry Roux outlined in quite graphic detail her head injuries, he cracked. He had to take out a tissue from his top pocket and wipe his tears, and that was the first time we've really seen a display of emotion in this particular proceedings. And also we had a lot of emotion from the really strong female witness, Michelle Berger. Dr. Berger has been absolute stalwart on the stand, refusing to bend under Barry Roux's very tough cross-examination. But later on, when she was describing once again having to recount the very emotional screaming that she heard, she lost it entirely herself and had to spend quite a few seconds trying to compose herself and couldn't bring herself together. A real display of what she herself described as raw emotion.
Aubrey, you've been standing back a pace away from the court, but you no doubt have got an idea already from your listeners on 702 as to what their reactions been to what is a show trial really in your country, the very first televised trial.
Absolutely, Jeremy, it is definitely a show trial. But you remember that one of the issues that was raised by Judge Mlambo as he made the decision to allow media houses to broadcast this on a 24-hour basis was that he wanted to debunk the myth that the South African justice system is unfair. The very fact that we are having this particular showpiece is precisely because we have a sporting icon. which perhaps raises the question as to whether would this be done for other people. And I suppose that some people would say that it is therefore unfair. But it's also raised a number of issues. For example, the fact that there wasn't an interpreter yesterday to stand in for the one that was supposed to be there raises questions about if this is happening at this level for such a high-profile case, what is happening at the lower courts, which suggests that perhaps we are not getting the kind of justice for the poorer people in the lower courts as perhaps Oscar Pistorius is having in this particular trial. Then, of course, the whole issue of the brutality of Advocate Barry Roux in his cross-examination. That has been quite revealing. A lot of people didn't realize that that's the kind of thing that happens in court.
Yeah, and quite a bruiser.
Absolutely, absolutely. But of course, the steadfast testimony of Michelle Berger has been something to behold. So I think that those are some of the issues that have raised a lot of discussion amongst the South African public. And then, of course, the whole issue of I think we are beginning to understand that there perhaps was a little bit of wisdom in the fight by the media houses to have this broadcast, because we're now beginning to understand what are the raw issues that make for the running of a court case of this nature, which perhaps I think a lot of people wouldn't have known about had this not happened.
Thanks very much indeed, Aubrey and Alex, there for giving their thoughts after day 2 of this fascinating trial. Don't forget, you can watch continuous coverage on Sky News from 8 in the morning all the way through the week, and of course you can catch up on a special programme of the day's events at 9:30 every evening on Sky News. So far, South Africa's so-called trial of the century has been compelling viewing, full of drama and raw emotion.